judge. Here's what the PNG people did, CPC. They said, judges are not just this passive referee that only apply what the parliament says is law. No, judges are our leaders. So they define judges as leaders, fundamentally redefining what the judge is. Now, when you say leader to someone in a Melanesian context, you mean someone who's got a bigger economic responsibility, village responsibility, customary responsibility. Now, the CPC says we want to define our judges as community leaders. They are leaders of our country. They have a stake in nation building, which means they should not be isolated in the courthouse, standing there, just waiting for the lawyers to bring the case to them. They must go where injustice is done. So they redefine judges with a broader socio-political function and a policing accountability function, not just a strictly legal function. I said last night, they did not only just say that as a feel-good statement in the Constitution. They put it into action. They drafted the teeth. An example was Section 57. Let's give one example. It's not here in Solomon Islands, but just imagine that. In Western Province, there's logging there, right? Yeah, there's logging there. In the PNG context, if there's if there's logging somewhere there's in Western Province, and if there's human rights issues, or when I say human rights issues, I mean the land of the local people are being polluted by loggers, you know, oil spill or something like that. That's an issue of justice now. But for these local people in Western Province to seek justice, they have to get the evidence, come to Honiara, get a good lawyer, pay 10, 20,000, file the complaint, 3 months later, judge set the trial, they go to court, 6 months later, the first hearing. During the time, the logging company could compromise the evidence. Police might go and police from here might be sent and abuse the complainants. So the people in Western would say, no, I don't want to go because I've been threatened now. I don't want to go and give evidence. But the judge will not do anything until the case comes to him here in Honiara. Even though the judge may read in the paper that there is an oil spill and lots of places are being polluted, the judge will have to wait for the Western Province community to come to him before he can deliver justice. That's the Western concept of judicial work, which we happen every day here. The CPC and PNG says no. That is no justice. Judges are the leaders of justice in our community. We must be giving them the ability to go to Western Province and investigate it themselves if it need be. Or summon the people responsible there to bring the case. Right there and then. So in the PNG context, a judge can pick up a newspaper, read about it, the next day or the same day pick up a phone and summon the police officer or the police commissioner, the police minister, and say, can I see a report on your investigation on this case tomorrow in my chamber? Without the people coming to lay a complaint, judge can do that. Judge in PNG can go into a police cell or prison. On their own, they can just drive in there, like my good judge here. Can drive into a police cell or a prison on his own accord. Surprise the correctional services officers and the guard. There's all judges here. He can inspect the prison, and if he finds that the prison is not humane, it's not in good condition, the prisoners are getting sick, there's toilet and pee and everything, he can command the correctional minister to come to the court tomorrow to explain and fix it up without the prisoner laying a complaint. If this sort of thing were to happen in New Zealand or Australia, there will be constitutional crisis. Because to them, judge is not a leader. Judge is just a applier of law. To the PNG community, judge is a leader. Concerned with justice there and then, not when it's brought to them. I won't go to the others. There are 11 of similar powers like this in the book. If you have time, you will read. Or in fact, perhaps the speaker is there. I could probably give you another power. Section 23. And I'll finish there with that example. Sometimes, if you understand, Speaker, it's politically convenient to defer Parliament in order to not destabilize the government. But sometimes we do that in order, and while doing that, we can undermine democracy. PNG is known for doing that. Vote of no confidence and all of that. Speakers, they tend to move around sitting dates. But the court had an inherent power under Section 23 that says if a person has a duty to perform, doesn't matter whoever the person is, Prime Minister to the Speaker, and if they fail to perform the duty, the court can summon that person to perform it. Which means that if the Speaker says, oh, members of Parliament, no sitting next week, we'll refer to two months' time. Member of Parliament can come to court and the court can summon the Speaker to have the sitting next week. By doing, they can go to the legislative arena. By summoning the police to explain or the correctional services to shut down the prison, they go to the executive arena. They have the ability to move between those three arms and hold them accountable, not waiting for complaints to come to them. They go where justice is needed. The second rethinking of this book, there's about 32 bodies, now it's going up, I think 34 now, in Papua New Guinea, including the Ombudsman, the Public Solicitor, the Public Prosecutor, the Auditor General. They don't come under any of the three arms of government. They don't come under the executive or the legislature or the judiciary. The Constitution created them, born and bred within the Constitution. They live as a constitutional entity. And Constitution gives direct, clear statement that says these bodies are not subject to control by any person or authority, only by the Constitution. Which means that, and we have it all the time in Papua New Guinea, and Judge was one of the key person in that, when he was a lawyer for the Ombudsman. Every time Parliament passed a law, they would challenge it in the court if that law is in question. They would challenge the validity, the constitutionality of it. And Prime Minister will do nothing, because these are a separate body altogether. They are born and bred supported by the Constitution. Sometimes government want to interfere with them, courts will come and say, no, don't touch them. They are guided by the Constitution. So they are a very strong accountability institution that the founders brought that into the Constitution. In Australia, never. New Zealand, none. British system, no. All of them are subscribed to three arms of government. That was part of PNG's story for 70 years, since 1901, when Australia and Britain ruled. All of these bodies were part of the ministerial department. They were not performing their role, so the founders of the Constitution, the indigenous people says, we want this body to be different. We want to separate from the British way of government, create a fourth arm, a body that exists outside of three arms of government. I am only raising these two examples, or I guess emphasizing on these two examples, with the key theme here is that the CPC didn't just have this conversation. They followed up with substantive framework in the Constitution. Many a times we talk about change. But when it comes to building it into it and giving teeth, we intimidate it. We shy away. many of the scholars said that's because sometimes global south or thinkers in the developing world, they always want to look at the developed world and say, what we're doing is not with the UN or with the British or with the Australian standards. Maybe we should step back. It's a bit of intimidation. CPC faced that in 1974, 69 all the way. But they said, no, we want to build a PNG that's responding to PNG circumstances, even if it means challenging the British system, Australian system, the colonial system put upon us. I will leave some of the other technical discussions out, but I want to bring it home to our circumstances and some of the discussions in the morning. In the consultation that we are now having or thinking with reforms to the Solomon Islands, I think PNG constitution and what I've just explained, which fundamentally shifted the goalposts of the doctrine of separation of power, fundamentally shifted the goalpost of what is a judicial function. There was a whole lot of rethinking that needs to be done. The PNG did that. The Solomon Islands perhaps might consider the same approach. If you want to really build a Solomon Islands for Solomon Islands, the rethinking exercise must have teeth. Vanuatu or Tuvalu did that 2 years ago. They were unafraid to challenge international law. You see, their country, scientists say that in 20, 30 years' time, you will no longer have a Tuvalu because of the climate change impact. As Phil mentioned in the morning, to be a state under international law, you've got to meet 4 key requirements, and one of them is physical territory. And the other one is defined population. Population must live in their territory. If they don't, you no longer qualify as a state. Many Tuvaluans are living outside and living inside Australia and New Zealand. And eventually the physical territory will no longer be. So that means that in 30 years' time, the state of Tuvalu, under current international law, will no longer be a state. It will be wiped out. So Tuvalu said, well, that's international law. That's what the British and the French and the American system built to us. But we will create a Tuvalu notion, a Tuvalu version of our constitutional identity, our place in the world. So 2 years ago, I was called to assist them in drafting a constitutional amendment that declared that the state of Tuvalu must exist in perpetuity. And those are the words. Must exist in perpetuity irrespective of climate change impact. It was an amendment that directly confronted the international law, challenges it, but they didn't care. The leaders there says, we don't care what international law feels. We want to state it clearly to the world that this is what Tuvalu wants. A month later, the Pacific Island Forum adopted that. They said all states in the Pacific Island must exist in perpetuity. And now lobbies taking place in many other smaller states. Eventually they will build what is known in international law as state practice, leading to a customary law. And they will create an exception